Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh. How is everyone? I'd like to welcome everybody to this course, Seminar in Linguistics. And inshallah today we're going to start our first session. Sorry for being late a little bit. I was trying to fix the materials for the course. So as you know, we have started really late. We have missed whole 1 week, but inshallah we'll try to see if we need extra lectures. Then we will try to organize an extra lecture. If we don't, then that will be fine. You know that this course, in this course actually we choose a topic and then we elaborate on that topic and we discuss it in further detail. So yesterday I just knew about this subject and I was trying to find a topic that, of course, a linguistic topic that is really very recent and that is very useful for the students, that is not covered in the previous courses that you have covered. And because of the time, actually, I was thinking of 3 topics. And I wanted you actually to choose one of these topics, but then because the time frame that we have only like 4 sessions today, to the after tomorrow, and next week only. I said we're not going to have this privilege of choosing the topic, very recent topic. So I'm going to choose something that is very central to linguistics, and I'm going to give you something that is useful if you are going to teach English, and it's also useful if you're not going to teach, if you're going just to be like a language learner. So inshallah, in this course we're going to take something called language learning, okay, or second language learning. If you give me like 5 minutes, I will upload the materials for you. So give me 5 minutes. And then inshallah we'll start ala tool, okay? So I'm not away and the voice is here. I'm just going to upload the materials for you, okay? Shukran. Inshallah the voice will not cut like yesterday. So inshallah you are here, you are with me, you can hear me now. There's a problem with the voice. Okay, if it cuts, ladies, I will say again what I was saying and I will try to resume the recording, okay? Right. As I said, I wanted to give you something like more options. I want to give you more freedom in choosing the topic, but because we don't have time actually, I said this time we're going to stick to something, and I was thinking of something really very trendy, something very recent, but again, the time limit. So I'm going to give some students, they were asking me about how are we going to be assessed, what are we going to do in this course. So what I'm going to do in this course, inshallah, is to give you lectures, slides, and as usual, at the end of this session, inshallah, I will give you the files. You will study for the final exams from my slides. The final exam will be multiple choice and will be also true or false. But ladies, I want you to do something. I want you to do some readings for yes, I have a problem with the voice. It keeps cutting. But inshallah, I hope it will not do it now. Okay, so inshallah in the final exam you will have multiple choice and also you will have true or false questions. Again, I said also you will have some readings, and I will give you some chapters or some passages or some references to read. I will provide you with them because, as I said, we don't have enough time. We have barely 4 sessions. So any question before we start, ladies, regarding the assessment, regarding the final exam? Any question? Okay, so since nobody has any question, we're going to start. Okay, as you can see now here in the first slide, we're going, inshallah, to focus on second language learning and teaching. Okay, so it's maybe you have taken this course before in applied linguistics. I have a question by Dua here. She says, do we have to write research papers? Well, actually, because of the time limit, I was thinking of asking you to write something and then I will give it like 30% of the assessment of this course. But then I said, no, we don't have enough time. So this time, or this course, inshallah, will be only objective assessment, true or false, and as I said, objective questions. Okay. So it will be like a regular subject, unfortunately. Okay, so let's see the outline, what we are going to cover today in today's lecture. Okay, so we're going to look at the age of the learner. Is it really the younger the better? We're going to look at also if there is a natural order for learning a language. We're going also to see if language one help or hinder learning a second language. We're going also to look at socialization. It's a phenomenon when the speaker cannot learn further, when you feel that you are stuck, you can't get more. Also, we're going to discuss the difference between your knowledge of a language and your usage of that language. And finally, we are going to look at some of the hypotheses that suggested to explain second language learning, like noticing hypothesis and attention hypothesis. Okay? Right. This question of age when you learn a second language. So here we're not discussing first language acquisition. That topic, I'm sure that you have covered that during applied linguistics and probably when you took other subjects. Today we're going to be focusing only on second language learning, and we're not saying acquisition, we're saying only learning, because when you learn a language, a second language, you are not acquiring the language, especially if you are in an older age. So we have this saying that says, you learn a language better if you are young. So the younger is better than being old for learning a language. Okay, so they found, and I'm sure we have also noticed, that children, they learn the first language very easily and very spontaneously. And children also, they seem to learn a second language and sometimes a third or a fourth language very quickly, quicker and better than adults. So all these things we observe, and I'm sure everyone, especially if you were studying abroad, you have noticed that children learn language much faster than their parents. So the linguists and the researcher came up with some hypotheses regarding this age and language learning. So the first hypothesis, and when I say hypothesis, I mean it's like a suggestion, or they try to explain something, and they arrange it in some sentences, and then they do a research to prove it or disprove it. So the first hypothesis regarding learning a second language is that children have an innate ability for language learning, which is either absent or less effective in adults. Again, children, they have something inside them, an innate, something natural, an innate ability for language learning, which is either absent, older people, they don't have it, or maybe it's there, but it's less effective when they are adults. The second hypothesis says adults would learn languages more easily if they tried to learn in the way children do. Okay? So as long as the child can learn the language very quickly, he must be following the way that if the adult can follow, he will learn the language quickly as well. Okay? So these hypotheses are widely accepted as true by people like us, by non-specialists, non-linguist people. And if you want to make sure that they are correct, we need to do some research, as I said, to prove or disprove. It's not enough just to give explanation without doing research to examine these hypotheses. The two hypotheses here, as I said, widely accepted by many people. Parents, they believe so. Teachers, they believe so. But let's see what the science believes. So if you remember from your applied linguistics course, you remember this term, the critical period hypothesis, if you remember that, the CPH. I don't know if you remember it, but this is a term, and this term was firstly suggested by Linenberg in the 60s. And Linenberg was a neurolinguist, so he was interested in studying the relationship between the brain and language. So Linenberg posited or suggested that lateralization, and by lateralization we mean the developmental process in which the two hemispheres, the two parts, hemispheres are the parts of the brain, become more specialized makes language learning more difficult after puberty. And what do you mean by puberty? Puberty, it's the age when the child becomes an adult. Okay, البلوغ, puberty. Okay, so Liebenberg, exactly, سن البلوغ. So Liebenberg suggested that there is a period when there is the capacity or the ability of the brain to process language becomes less effective. His suggestion, okay, so he came up, as I said, with this explanation of lateralization. Okay, let me take the pen to highlight the item. Okay. So Liebenberg came up with lateralization, and he says basically that after puberty it will become difficult for an adult to learn the language. Okay? Because the brain, the two parts of the brain, they are already specialized and they already have developed, completed development. There were some challenges, hypotheses, and also some research challenging this notion of lateralization and critical period hypothesis. Okay, ladies, I need to say what I was saying again, because the voice. Okay, so can you hear inshallah now clear? Okay, as I said, some researchers challenged this hypothesis, and they said that there are many factors actually take place in the process of learning a second language. So you can't say that there is a period, a critical period. You should have also considered other factors. Like, for example, are you learning the language in a natural setting? Or are you learning the language in an instruction or instructed environment? Is it in the classroom or is it in the natural everyday environment? Okay, so you have to consider these factors. All right, and the amount of exposure of the language as well. So if you are learning a language in the classroom, your exposure, the amount of exposure will be limited, and also the type of language you hear is limited. Whereas if you learn the language in the natural setting, the amount will be also different, and also the type of interaction and the language will be also different. So you have to consider that. Another challenge, you have also to consider the needs of the learner. If you are in a classroom, you have different needs than if you are using the language in a natural setting. So it's not only your brain, but there are other factors play or have a role in the process of learning a second language. Okay, so these are some points that raise to challenge the critical period hypothesis, and we have some evidence to support these, the different, let's say, or the criticism against the critical period hypothesis. For example, children are not always successful language learners in all contexts. We might have sometimes children feeling shy, they don't want to learn the language, so they're not always successful learners. Sometimes we might see some adults who became very fluent language speakers. So they mastered the second language after the critical period, after puberty. Okay? So Monza says, learners who started learning a second language in secondary school soon caught up with children who started the same language or second language in primary schools. So he found, Monzo, in research conducted in 2008, that children, even if they started later, the level will be similar to those who started learning the language at early years. So the level will become similar. So the idea of having a critical period for learning a language is now challenged. Okay, so age is not a factor influencing second language learning by itself. Okay, so Yasmin here is asking us what is the CDH means. It's CDH is the critical period hypothesis, and critical period hypothesis says that there is a critical period for learning a second language successfully. If you are younger, you will learn the language better. If you are older, you are not going to learn the language as successfully as little children. Okay, after puberty, it will be much more difficult for your brain to learn a second language. So this was an idea suggested by Nirenberg. And also, if you remember Chomsky, a very famous linguist, he also borrowed this idea of critical period. And also in his generative grammar, or in his perspective for explaining second language or first language acquisition, he also discussed this hypothesis of the critical time or period for learning a second language. Okay, so here we said that some people, they have this hypothesis or idea in their brains, teachers, parents, but when they conducted research, they found that there are some challenges and there are some evidence against this idea. Okay, so this is what I said. For non-specialist people, parents, politicians, teachers, sometimes they think that it's very true that children will learn the language much faster than adults. Okay, so there is a time or an age when the children learn the language much quicker. All right? So language policies. And language policies, we mean the government or the ministries responsible for education. When these policies are formed, they usually take such hypotheses into consideration, instead of basing their policies on research, on sound empirical evidence. They rely on such speculations and hypotheses. And as we said, that language policies, they can have very critical consequences or results for people's lives. For example, but here in Saudi Arabia, we didn't actually start teaching a second language early. But in some countries, because they believe that there is a critical age for learning the language, they will start teaching the second language very early in school. And many parents, I'm sure, this idea will influence their decisions. It's like when you, for example, put your children in an international school, because you say they will learn the language very quickly at a younger age. So you choose an international primary school for your children because you believe that they will be successful learners at this age in the primary stage. So governments also, in their policies for education, these speculations usually influence their decisions. So they're very influential and very widely accepted. Sorry, ladies, I don't know what's the problem with the mic. So, in spite of the different hypotheses and the research, the critical period hypothesis is still a valid hypothesis, is still a valid explanation. And we can see that some the same actually. So when you say speaking or pronunciation is maybe there's a critical period. Let me fix it, ladies. I don't know if it's from the microphone or from the internet. Okay. Can you hear me? Okay, good. So, some people suggested that there may be more than one critical period, maybe more than one let's say, time to master an ability. So maybe for little children, they can master pronunciation much better than adults. So maybe there is a critical period for learning the sound system. Or this is why the children, they can't speak the language, or they can pronounce just like the native speakers of the language. So maybe there is a critical period for pronunciation, but we can see that the adults can learn grammar much better. So maybe there is a critical period for language, or for grammar, which is a little bit later than the critical period for pronunciation. Okay, so this is another suggestion. All right. So as I said here, there may be different critical periods for different areas of language. So pronunciation and syntax. There is the pronunciation or the critical area. Sorry. Can you hear me, ladies, now? Yeah, I know there is a problem with my voice. It goes and comes. I don't know. There's something problem. Okay, you can hear me now. All right, good. If it gets ladies, and sometimes I kept talking and I don't notice that it has gone. So please remind me or tell me, teacher, your voice has gone. So I will read or I will say again what I was saying. Okay, so we said that there may be more than one critical period. So for pronunciation, maybe the critical period will be a childhood, whereas syntax, the critical period can extend till the adulthood. So adults can learn language as effectively and as successfully as little ones. And we also should consider external factors such as availability of resources and also the qualified teachers, the difference that the teacher make sometimes. The difference is a major difference in the process of learning a second language. And also we should look at the society. The local socio-linguistic context may be more important than age sometimes. Like if the language is spoken around the learner, that will make it much easier, even if he is at an older age. Okay, so that we should consider other factors other than age only. Okay, so age of exposure is one factor actually. It's not the only factor influencing second language, or it's not the ultimate factor. If we consider the research, the above research results, we should arrive at the same conclusion. Okay, so to isolate the significance of age from its socio, cultural, and psychological context is to misconstruct its impact. Okay, so this is by Moya. This is very important regarding age and other factors. So critical period studies have typically done just this, with too little attempt to clarify the nature of its influence and its influence on the product, the final product of the process of learning a second language. So the absence of focus on individual factors has done little to advance a real understanding of the process. Okay, so there was a problem with the methodology when the research was conducted. Different research was conducted. Okay, so also this is another saying by Moya. So while quantitative analysis has been a valuable tool, okay, so the research that was done, it was very helpful to verify factors, the relationships between factors. It has brought us only, it only gave us like part of the truth. It did not give us the whole story behind successful language learning. Okay, so we have, as I said, to consider other factors. So we should not only rely on quantitative methods, only collecting numbers from different, let's say, speakers and then do some analysis, quantitative analysis. Okay, so we have to go deeper and explore the opinions, explore the perspectives of the speakers themselves to understand the different roles played by the other factors. Okay, so Moya basically here, he is calling, or he wants us to use other methods, to do other research using different tools to explore the main important factors that influence second language learning. Okay, so I will give you a summary of what I have said. So basically, we're talking about age and the importance of the idea of the age of the learner, and we said that that's a hypothesis widely accepted by people. These hypotheses were then challenged by research. Again, we have to consider or reconsider the type of research done, and we arrived at the conclusion that age is important, but it is not the only factor in play for the second, third, or fourth language. All right? So we will leave age now, and we will look at another important aspect of second language learning. Okay, so this is another topic that has been widely also speculated by linguist teachers. The question of the order of learning the order of learning the different linguistic features of a second language. And again, we will look at some research, and then we will see if there is these studies were challenged by other studies more. Okay. So if you remember also, ladies, from the applied linguistics course, we have looked at some morpheme studies. These studies basically looked at different linguistic features, like, for example, plural S, possessive S, ing, ed, or the past tense of. Yeah, I know. Now I think you can hear me. Okay. So these studies, they found that there is a truly an order for learning or acquiring the different, let's say, the different linguistic morphemes. Okay, so the children, they learn, let's say, the plural S before the possessive S. Okay, and they also observe that this order is also observed in a classroom where adults are learning a second language. Okay, so it's not only observed among children, but it's also observed among adults. So researchers try to do some studies to establish the order of learning or acquiring the different morphemes. So they came up with this suggestion. So they said the first the first linguistic or morpheme to be learned will be the ing, followed by the plural, and if you go along the line, the last one will be the possessive S. However, the order of acquisition studies, these studies deal with the grammar only. They only looked at grammar. And most of these studies, they dealt with beginner learners. Some research findings, they found that teachers experience the use of ing forms without the auxiliary, that there will be differences between the learners when they learn the different linguistic features or morphemes. But can we say that the teacher observations or the, let's say, speculations, are they sufficient to be taken into consideration? Okay, so what we can learn from this? We can learn that it's very useful to teach different morphemes in the natural order they are learned through. However, what if we, for example, introduce some of the late ones early? What will happen? Do you think the learners will not learn them? Do you think that they will not catch and digest them until they digest and, let's say, acquire the previous ones? So some studies found that learners need to be developmentally ready to acquire what is taught. So there must be some time given to the learner. He has to be mentally developed. So there is a hypothesis or a theory suggested actually by Pennyman, who says that we should teach what is learnable. So there is no use of teaching something that is not, or that will not be learned by the learner. So he introduced teachability and learnability. Okay, so also they said that the learner, once he learns something, he will be able to generalize from some of the aspects, like, for example, the plural S, the past tense. These morphemes, they are very, let's say, very unique. They are very, very, let's say, prominent. He called it actually markedness. They are very observable. Okay, so the learner can generalize beyond the examples that he knows. Okay, so if it's very much marked, if it's very much prominent and very much easily noticed, then he will be able to generalize in a much easier way. Whereas if it's not observable, then he will not be able to generalize. We will now move to another concept in second language learning, that is universal grammar. And I'm sure you are familiar with this concept. This concept was firstly introduced by Chomsky, and if you remember, when he introduced his perspective of second language or first language acquisition. So Chomsky suggested that there is a device, there is something in our brain that is or help the child to learn the language. He called it the language acquisition device, or the LAD. Later on, he suggested another version, and he said that there is some universal grammar in our mind. So this theory suggests or posits that the grammar of all languages, they have certain principles, shared principles. So, for example, all languages, they have nouns, all languages have verbs, all languages have subjects. There are some differences, actually, but there are some principles shared between all languages. He calls them parameters. Okay, so the universal grammar hypothesis by Chomsky says that there is, in our minds, we have the, let's say, we have the principles, these principles, or the core principles. But the difference is we will develop later. So we are programmed to learn the language because we have these principles in our minds. Okay, so the child acquires his first language by adjusting these principles and parameters according to what he hears, according to the input he is exposed to. So this is, of course, Chomsky's idea. Other researchers or linguists argue that language acquisition can be explained by general cognitive abilities. So it's not only the LAD, it's not only universal grammar, but it's the cognitive ability of us, of human beings. So learning a language is a mental ability like remembering, like counting. So they explain language learning as one of the abilities, as one of the abilities that we have, human beings. Okay, so do you think that do you agree with Chomsky that we have a specific device, or let's say special principle in our minds for learning a language? Do you agree with him? They said that if we have, okay, so Lula says yes. So they said if universal grammar truly exists, then when the learner learns the second language, access this device or this part, this will also affect the learnability. Remember the hypothesis? Learnability, teachability. So the notions of universal grammar and also the LAD might affect the learnability and teachability of the different linguistic chunks. And also we should remember that some items, especially the items with the very prominent features or the markedness of items, is this going to influence learning? Just give me 1 minute, ladies. Okay, ladies, sorry for that. Okay, so now we come to the question as we have discussed before. When we learn the language at a later stage, do you think the first language or the mother tongue would help or hinder or cause problems for learning a second language? So one of the first scientists, or let's say linguists, who answered this question or thought about this idea, Lado, he suggested something called contrastive analysis hypothesis. And I'm sure you have come across this one also in applied linguistics. He stated that if the features of language 1 is similar to language 2, if they are similar in some aspects, these aspects will make second language learning much easier. But if there are some different features or differences between the two languages, then learning some aspects will be also difficult. So contrastive analysis of CA of language 1 and language 2 can help actually highlight the similarities and also highlight the differences. And there will be some interference between language 1 and language 2. And it can be negative transfer. However, some research later found that the differences between the two languages will not always cause difficulties. For example, when you learn to insert a subject in the sentence, they found it is more difficult than learning to take it out. There is some explanation from the universal grammar hypothesis that we usually drop what is unmarked. Okay? So there's an explanation, but however, research found that it's not necessarily because there is a difference between the languages. There will be difficulties in learning or in acquiring the second language. There is also some positive transfer from language 1. So sometimes the difficulties may cause something called avoidance rather than errors. So instead, because there is, like, as I said, differences between the languages, the learner will avoid sometimes using some structures, and he will not produce any output because he is afraid of making errors. And they found that transfer between the two languages depends on a range of factors. As I said, markedness, the prominence of the linguistic feature, an area of language, for example, phonology, writing, and also social learning context. And also, it depends on language typology. So when we bring the attention of the learner to the differences between language 1 and language 2, this may be helpful, especially in teaching grammar, in teaching phonology, in teaching, for example, pragmatics, and some aspects of the language. Okay, so what we do know is that learners use their prior knowledge the knowledge and the background as a starting point. Okay. So language 1 will be a major component, a major part of your knowledge that will influence learning a second language. And along the line, they will construct, when they develop learning a second language, they will construct their own language, or they call it interlanguage, as Selinka says. Okay, so interlanguage is the language that is developing. So it's their own version of second language, with the mistakes and errors that they might have or they may face. So gradually this language, or the interlanguage, will become less and less like language 1 and more like the target of second language. Okay, so again, the developer of this hypothesis, they have this idea that interlanguage, or the language that is developing, this language develops in a systematic fashion. It's not random. There is some order, there are some steps that the development process is taking. So how do learners build up their interlanguage? First of all, they form some hypotheses about how the language works. Then they test them out in speaking, writing, communication. If they discover that there is a problem or there is an error, then they modify the language or the interlanguage if they think that there is a problem or it doesn't work. So errors and feedback on these errors are a very important part of this process. Okay? Errors include mistakes, or sometimes we call them slips. Okay? Okay, so the interlanguage, the language that is developing, is influenced by the natural order of acquisition hypothesis we have discussed earlier, and also by universal constraints. It is also influenced by the social context around the learner and the abilities and strategies of the learner himself. And when the learner joins, let's say, a classroom or an institution, hopefully the teaching or the instruction will facilitate the interlanguage development. But sometimes it does make a difference, especially feedback on errors. However, sometimes there is like a point, the learner reaches a point when he cannot learn further. His interlanguage cannot develop further. So they reach a plateau, or they reach an area in their learning, and they stop. And this pause might be temporarily, or sometimes it might be permanently. And if it's permanently, we call it fossilization. Okay, so like a fossil. Fossilization, it means khalas. He cannot learn anymore. Even if, for example, he produces an error and you try to correct the error, he will reproduce the same output every time, regardless of the correction and feedback. And there is some possible reasons for this stage. Either the learner fails to notice, he stops to notice the gap between the output or the outside feedback, and that of more proficient language users. Okay, they will stop noticing what they produce and compare it to the other's language. So again, it's all the notion of noticing your own mistakes. Sometimes the learner will not develop because he, either consciously or unconsciously, wants to retain or chooses to retain some non-native speakers' features. So I know some people who are really very fluent in English, but still they like to keep some accent in their output. They want to be different from the native speakers for social purposes or for social reasons. Sometimes the learner himself feels that he doesn't need to communicate further. Khalas. His needs or communicative needs are satisfied. Now he's not motivated to improve his language. Sometimes the learner himself does not have enough exposure to the language. He does not have enough time to produce output. So there is not sufficient input or output for the learner to reach the right level. Okay. So now let's look about two different things. Your knowledge about the language and your usage of the language. So knowing the word, or let's say a grammatical rule consciously, does not necessarily mean you can use it in an accurate way when you need it. So sometimes you know that this is correct, you know the rule, let's say for the using the present perfect tense. But when you need it sometimes, you cannot produce a sentence using it. Okay, so there are two different things. And we will look why this might happen later on when we discuss Stephen Krashen's hypotheses. Okay, there is also another notion by Anderson that we will look also inshallah in next session that give us explanation for why sometimes we know something but we fail to use it. Okay, so let's give this for a second session. All right. As I said, sometimes the adults or the learners, they fail sometimes to notice a linguistic feature. So cognitive researchers says that attention is sometimes limited, so is not always a good resource, or learners, they don't always notice everything in the input they hear. No, we're not talking about disordered attention. Disordered attention, I think it is related to hyperactive activity. No, here we are discussing the notion of observing something in other speech, in the input the learner receives. Okay, so let's say, for example, you are talking to someone and he will produce a sentence with a mistake, and then you give him a feedback on his mistake, but still at, let's say, later occasions he will produce the same mistake or the same error. Either he did not. There are some reasons that we have discussed. One of the reasons to explain this is that he might not notice, he might not have noticed this error. Okay? So this is what I mean by noticing. So noticing the error is very important, because if you notice the error, then you will start to try to modify it or correct the error. So Van Patten says that learners attend to meaning before form. Okay, and we will discuss this later. They want their message to get across, and this is their main goal, not the form, not let's say the syntax of the output. Okay, so, and this also we will discuss later, which is the input enhancement. Teachers' role, is to help the learners to notice their errors as a first step to teach them the correct structures or the correct pronunciation or the correct, let's say, usage. Just give me 1 second, ladies, please. If you want ladies to pray, I'll give you just like 5 minutes. Or shall, if you want me, because one student, she sent me a message, she wants to pray. Although I think we can pray after, because we will finish around like 4:30, like after 20 minutes. Do you want ladies, do you want to take 5 minutes to pray, or are we? I think it is, yes, better to just finish, and then I will leave you after 20 minutes. Yes, because still, we still have time. Okay. We only have like few slides. Some of the slides we're going to discuss, inshallah, in the second session. Okay, so again, we're talking about noticing errors. This is related to a notion of engagement, to the notion of engagement with the language. So, if the individual is engaged, he is alert, he will pay attention, he will focus more and construct some knowledge. So the engaged individual has a positive, purposeful willing and also autonomousness. So he will be more alert and he will pay extra attention, as I said, when learning the linguistic feature, whether it's, let's say, a word, a rule, a sound. And also, the engaged individual usually is social, and he is willing to interact and initiate communication. Okay? By the way, this lady, Valberg, she has taught me. She was my teacher. Okay? So again, inshallah, we will discuss this idea or the hypothesis of noticing later on, inshallah, probably in the second session. So as I said, a first step to notice, a first step to learn a linguistic feature is to notice it. If you don't notice it, you will not learn the right structure. You might learn other things. So this is why sometimes in a classroom the teacher will explain, let's say, 2 or 3 linguistic features, grammatical rules or whatever. And then at the end of the classroom you will find some learners, they mastered all 3 because they noticed them. Some learners, they might master 2 aspects only, and they fail to notice, they fail to see, or let's say, to focus on the 3rd linguistic feature. So this again brings us to the idea of learnability and teachability. So sometimes the learner is not yet ready to learn this feature. So again, this will bring us to the notion or idea of natural order of linguistic features. So it's useful sometimes to construct, let's say, the syllabus according to the natural order of linguistic features, because this will facilitate learning of these features. The learnability of each feature will be greater if it's based on the natural order. The learner will be able more to notice it and then learn it in a much easier way. Okay? So here are some of the references that I used to construct the slides for this session. So if you have fun, ladies, go through some of these publications. They are very recent, some of them, and some of them are really classic. Okay, so for example, Krashen's hypotheses, which inshallah we will discuss later on, they are quite old, during the 80s, and some of his work also were during the 70s. Inshallah, we'll give you some parts of these publications. So if you can see here, I have an ebook. Inshallah, I will upload it for you. All right. Some of these publications, inshallah, I will send it to you. I will provide you with them. If we have enough time, I would rather divide the assessment between like 70% for an exam and 30% for producing the research paper based on one of the topics that we have covered. But again, for the time frame that we have, it will be difficult really to give you a sufficient material. And for today's lesson, actually, it's a lot of concepts, and maybe, inshallah, because yesterday I just very quickly constructed these, let's say, slides. Inshallah, for the next, inshallah, session, I'm going to give extra explanation, inshallah, provided I have more time than this session, because it was only just yesterday I knew about this course. So inshallah, next session it would be, inshallah, more explanation, and it will be much clearer, inshallah. So I need to stop now. Inshallah, once I finish this, I need to go over this file again. Once it's ready, I will post it, inshallah. You will find it, inshallah, on the Blackboard course content, inshallah. All right. And plus, I'm not feeling today very well. I think I started to have flu. So this is why I'm not really my voice and is not really very clear. الله يسلمكم. Okay, so inshallah, see you next session. Inshallah. If you have any questions, ladies, do send me, please, your questions through the WhatsApp group, inshallah. Okay? So, Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh.
دي ما تكلم